The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
And Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that has come to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father said to him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I've served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat, that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and now is found.'" This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, I ask that you be with us this morning as we look into your word. Help us to have open hearts to what you have for us. Help us to have ears to hear, eyes to see, and hearts to understand. Lord, let the meditation of all of our hearts and the words of my mouth be acceptable and pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and redeemer. Amen. Now, I don't know about you, but I've noticed a particular trend in our society, particularly in our economy, and how we exchange currency for goods. I'm not necessarily talking about using credit cards and debit cards and not having cash or even being able to use your phone to pay for things. I'm talking about how we're often ushered into a subscription-based model. You might know what I'm talking about. This is particularly true in the technological sphere. You purchase or you opt into a subscription to stream shows, whether it's through Hulu or Disney Plus or Amazon Prime or Netflix or anything that you want, you're able to pay monthly to receive that service. Well, it's not just that now. Now you can subscribe to even accessing certain stores. This is not new, but Costco is one, or Sam's Club. You have an annual fee in order to go there and shop. Or even now, you can even subscribe to services that send you clothes every single month. You can even rent clothes every single month that you have to return, and they wash, and they send those back out to someone else. You even have subscriptions in order to receive food every month or every week. And the underlying principle of a subscription is what? That you pay or opt into a contract because you recognize that there's a benefit in for you to do so. There's a cost and there's a benefit of that. Of course, it benefits the company because they have that recurrent income every single month. The benefit might be for us because it's a little bit cheaper to do month-by-month payment versus all at once, or we like the services that we continually receive through that. There's a cost and benefit. Well, this week, we are in the second part of a three-part series looking at the Gospel of Luke with Jesus' own words in chapters 14 and 15. And last week, we spoke about the cost of discipleship. And what we learned last week about the cost of discipleship is that the cost of discipleship is walking empty-handed. The cost is being willing to let go of everything in our life in order to accept Jesus. Well, when Jesus concludes that, we then continue to read, and what we're going to be talking about this morning in Luke 15, that gospel passage that we just read, is the benefit of discipleship. The benefit of discipleship. And so for us to do that well, it's important to know what preceded these few verses. So Jesus just finished talking about the cost of discipleship with those following him. If they want to follow him, they have to walk empty-handed. And strangely enough, do you know what happened? In chapter 15, verse 1, it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him." And you could probably guess. "And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" So there are tax collectors and sinners coming to eat at the table with Jesus, and the religious elite begin to grumble. Quite loudly, I might add, because Jesus heard them, and so I'm sure those other people heard them too, that how dare they come sit with one of ours? Or how dare Jesus sit with them? Now, what does Jesus do? He enters into a series of 3 parables about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And the reason why he does this, and commentators all agree, is because this is probably not only one of the most memorable chapters in all the Gospels, but this is the gospel within the gospel. This is the good news of what Jesus came to do and what he's telling the Pharisees, those grumbling, even those who they're grumbling about, to hear about the good news of who he is and what benefits we receive when we accept him. And if you want to know what that benefit is when we become a disciple of Jesus, the benefit of following Jesus, and what we're going to learn is love. The benefit of discipleship is love. It's a love for the lost, which we'll read here. It's love for us when we fail. And it's a love that God ultimately offers us time and time again. So let's look at this well-known passage many of us have heard, and let's see what we learn from it. So as we just read real quickly, there's a man with 2 sons. The eldest son is a good moralistic son. He does what he's supposed to do, does everything what's in right, looking in for the society. But then there's the second son, the youngest son, who asks for his inheritance early. Now, when the second son asks that, do you know what he's actually saying? He's saying that, yes, you're right. He's saying that you're worth more to me dead than alive. In fact, I'm not even patient enough to allow you to pass away. I want this now. So he is officially severing ties with this family of his and asking his father for his inheritance. And that inheritance, typically in this culture, is 1/3 of all that he had. And the father obliges, says, "Okay, here you go." And we know the story. He goes off, he squanders this wealth, this newfound wealth that he has. And it's not until an unforeseen circumstance happens, which is a famine that we just read about, and then he's forced to go find work, and not just any work, a work that was as shameful as work anyone can have if they were a person of Jewish faith or Jewish ethnicity. Because not only did he have to go work, he had to go work for probably a Gentile, raising and feeding unclean animals, pigs, pork. No self-respecting Jew would ever do such a thing like that. But that's how desperate he became. And he came to his senses and wanted to go and decided, you know what? Here I am starving, and yet I know that, or maybe, just maybe, if I went to my father and begged him, although I have no claim to be a son, maybe he'll let me be a servant. See, what we see here and the ways that we see the way that this father responds is paramount for us to understanding what it means to love the lost. So what happened here is that, yes, the son asked for his inheritance, but the father never stopped loving his son. You have to know that the moment that that son left, the father still loved him, because what happened when he returned? He ran and embraced him. Now, let me tell you, running, he probably wore a robe, a little bit different than this, but a robe nonetheless. Walking in these robes is almost impossible. Trying to run in it'd be quite the sight. And a dignified man would never do such a thing like that. But yet, this is what the father did. And the irony here is that this son who came to his senses, came to himself, he was actually right. He had no claim to be a son anymore. He was right about that. The father and even the fathers, all those who worked in his household, have every right to not only turn him away, but he might even have a worse punishment than that. And so when the father runs out to him, the son, to his credit, begins to go with his plan. But the father interrupts him and tells him, no, that's not what we're going to do. You are my son. You're going to sit at the table that you're always meant to sit at. This is a great demonstration of what it means to love for the lost. Now, I know of a family that I'm pretty close to who's had this almost same exact situation happen. There are two sons, the older son, the younger son. The younger son ends up moving out of the house around 17 or 18 years old. Doesn't finish high school, eventually gets his GED based upon his mother nagging him, but ends up in a series of succumbing to substance abuse. And through that, he ended up becoming homeless, began to couch surf from one friend to the next friend, and doing that for a season. And eventually all that dried up, and he had no place to go. He went to his parents and said, I don't have a place to go. Can I at least have a tent to go live in? The parents loved him and said, yes, we love you, but you know that there's things in which you've done in our household. He's taken from and stolen from them, and he's hurt us. We love you, but yet there's things in your life that we can't support, but yes, you can have this tent that we have in our garage. Eventually, this son began to come around the family more and more. There was a series of conversations that began to be had, and eventually this son decided to try to turn his life around. It's a great story, and doesn't mean there's not hardship there, but what happened each and every interaction that this son had with his parents told him that they loved him. Even in the midst of the hardship, the heartache, the pain that transpired, the son still knew that his parents loved him. That's similar to the picture we have here. The son, the only reason why he went back to his father, because he had a thought, an inkling, knowing that he was still loved by them. And that was his only hope. Now, I know there are people here, because this just happens in our world, that you might have sons or daughters or a brother or sister who's estranged in your family, who you may not communicate with, who's a source of pain and hurt. There might be even a sense of shame that they may not be following the Lord, or they may not be in communication with you. I'm here to tell you that you should not feel shame, that there is a sense here where we can really apply this to our life, and there's actually hope too. Because while this lost son was away, the father had no idea what was going on in his life. But the Lord was working on him, slowly but surely bring him to a place for him to come to himself and to enter back into relationship with his family. At the same time, this also encourages us to be sure that those people in our life that we might be estranged with, those people that might have hurt us in very concrete ways, and that might be justified, that you might be angry or upset with them, this also tells us something too, that we as Christians are also obligated to let them know that we still love them, even when there's pain and hurt there. I have to imagine when the son asked for his inheritance early, what that interaction was like. We don't necessarily know, we just know the nuts and bolts here. But I would imagine there was a parting word to be had. There's a son here, this is yours by birthright. I love you. I'd imagine that sat in this young son's heart and mind, and he remembered that in order to come back to him. See, as Christians, we are called to provide a path of forgiveness and restoration in every relationship of our life. And there's a model of this here. But that's just not within our immediate families. See, this love for the lost is not just about your son or daughter. It's not just about your brother or sister. It's not just about our immediate family. It's about the lost that's all around us. And the question we have to answer for ourselves is, how do we love them? And that love begins within ourselves. It begins with our attitudes, the way we think, the way we talk amongst each other with those out there who are not in here. And so if we're going to be a church community who wants to welcome the lost they have to know that we love them. It doesn't necessarily mean that we condone all different actions, but it does mean that our first interactions with someone who does not follow Jesus probably shouldn't be, hey, just so you know, what you're doing is, you shouldn't be doing that. If you start criticizing someone who's lost, I don't know about you, but if my first interaction with someone is that they start telling me what's wrong with my life, I may not want to have a second conversation. But if I interact with someone and I begin to feel and know this person actually wants to get to know me, they actually care about me, I know we're different, but maybe there's something there. They know that they're loved and cared for. And that may eventually lead to a conversation like this. And then we can open up our gates and have a seat already prepared for them at our table. So one thing that we need to start thinking about within our church body is that how would a non-believer, how would someone on the outside of our church view us as they walk in? So one of the reasons why at the table every single Sunday that I talk about what it looks like to come to receive is because I'm mindful there might be someone here who has never been here before. There might be someone watching who's never done a church like this before. And so I want to make sure that they know they're cared for and that they're welcome here and that we see them. And so on any given Sunday morning, we have to have eyes for those who may not know what it's like to be a part of Christ Church. And through doing that, we demonstrate love to them. Because we never quite know where someone is when they walk through our doors. And so my hope and prayer, whenever we get to Howell Mill Road, that property we keep praying for, is that that's a place where the lost know that they can walk through those doors and feel welcomed. No matter where they're from, what they look like, no matter if they've never stepped to church in their life, or the last church they stepped into, they left in quite a hurry. As Christians, we have to love the lost. Now, of course, life is complex, forgiveness is hard, and relationships are not always easy to mend, and it takes discernment in how to do that. So I'm not proclaiming and telling you today to go ahead and jump full-fledged into a relationship that's caused either emotional or physical pain. But I am saying that we should definitely pray and discern what does it look like to demonstrate love. Do these people in our life know that we love them, even though there's been pain and hurt? That's what we have to be willing to offer up to the Lord. So we first see within these interactions with the lost son and the loving father that the benefit of discipleship is love, particularly love for the lost. But this is not the only son that we have here this morning. And the eldest son, spoiler here, he's also lost. And he fails largely in this narrative too. See, this son who left is not the only lost son. The oldest brother also misses the point. See, this eldest brother is the moralistic son, the ethical son, who did all the right things outwardly, but had an issue in his own heart because he did not welcome back his younger brother. In fact, didn't even want to say that this is my brother. Remember, this is the father's son, not my brother. But what we learn here as we see this interaction between the father and the youngest son, and then the father and eldest son, is that there's still even love for when we fail. So when the oldest son hears about this, as we recall, he's angry, and then what happens? It says in verse 28, but he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. In the same way which the father went out to go meet the youngest son as he's coming in, the father goes out and meets his eldest son, who was once on the inside, is now choosing to be on the outside. The irony here is that this eldest son is becoming just as estranged as the youngest simply because his heart was not in the right place. It was about doing the right thing for his own benefit, more so than understanding it and having a love for the father, and simply letting that be the end of it. Tim Keller says this about this passage. He has a book called The Prodigal God. I highly recommend it. It's all about this parable. He says, neither son loved the father for himself. They both were using the father for their own self-centered ends, rather than loving, enjoying, and serving him for his own sake. This means that you can rebel against God and be alienated from him either by breaking his rules or by keeping all of them diligently. It's a shocking message. Careful obedience to God's law may serve as a strategy for rebelling against God. It doesn't take a whole lot to understand who the eldest brother is in this parable. Yes, of course, it's the Pharisees who did all the right things, but yet they were rebelling against God because they didn't understand what was at the heart of the law. At the same time, often today, and over 2,000 years later, the church itself becomes more and more like this eldest brother. We care about doing the right thing, having the appearance of what it looks like to follow the Lord. And yet, when someone lost comes to our table, we begin to wonder, why are they here? When someone comes through our doors that doesn't look like us, doesn't have our background or our pedigree, or doesn't dress like us, we begin to wonder, why are they here? There's grumbles all around about that. But how did the father respond even when that happened? This is not a rebuke, but an entreat of wanting this eldest brother to also enjoy in this celebration. The father said to him in verse 31, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. He's saying, you've always had the opportunity to have this joy and be able to throw a celebration like this. I've already given you everything. Come celebrate so that your brother is now back with us. And we were left not knowing what the brother decided to do because Jesus wants us to question what will we do? What will we do in these moments? So for the believer, for the churchgoer, for those of us who are more likely to follow the rules than to rebel against God outwardly, this passage has a lot to say to us. See, the warning here is that we have to be willing to take inventory of our own hearts and ask ourselves, do we utilize moral teachings in order to elevate our own self, in order to point out, I'm glad I don't do what they do over there? We use moral ethical teachings to create division between us and whoever the them are? We all do this. The reality is, we all do this each and every day. We're hypercritical creatures. We're all both like the lost son and this eldest brother. We both at one point disregarded God, and at the same point, when we come to him, we have a tendency to criticize those who do not know him and to make accusations and create them as the enemy. How dare they? They are the ones that are the problem with this world. We say this all the time in our own heart. But the encouragement here is that even when we do that, what does a father do? He loves us. He says, son, daughter, you have everything that I have. Come, sit at my table, make room for that lost brother or sister to have a seat too. We're all meant to celebrate together. And of course, you can be saying to yourself, yes, I understand this. The gospel is about love. I get it. I've heard this message before. We as Christians should always welcome people not like us. I get that. Yes, of course. But there's also this thing called judgment in the Bible. And it's not wrong for me to talk about God's judgment because the Bible talks about it. And yes, you're right. The Bible talks about judgment too. But do you understand who's doing the judgment? God, not us. We don't decide where God's judgment goes. And that's a very good thing. So it's not our job to point out where God's judgment's going to land. It's our job to love as Jesus has loved us. Because the reality is, if the Pharisees got their way here, do you know what would have happened to our church? None of us would actually be here. Because I'm pretty sure a majority of us are probably Gentiles. We would have been in those categories of sinners and tax collectors. But that's not the way the church was designed. That's not the gospel that Jesus proclaimed. See, the benefit of discipleship is love. Love for the lost, love for when we fail. But ultimately, this benefit of love is made perfect in that Jesus was offered for us. Jesus is that love. See, this feast is both for the youngest brother and the eldest. It is for all of us to celebrate for the goodness of what the Father has offered his children, which is his Son. He's saying to us each and every week, each and every moment of our life when we accept Jesus, that you are always with me, and all that mine is yours. And that all that mine is that is ours is his Son, Jesus. See, Jesus is the better brother who opens up the door for us to come celebrate with him. It's that Jesus who's telling both the Pharisees in this passage and also those that they're talking about, saying, no, everyone's welcomed at my table. Because that's the gospel that I have came here to usher into this world. And he was joyful and happy that these tax collectors and sinners were coming to him because he knew that he was the way that they would make it to the Father. Another theologian says this: people should not grumble about Jesus or his followers' associations. They should realize that God calls on disciples to encourage the rejected to be accepted by God. Part of that call means associating with sinners. Not by sharing in unrighteous activities, but by having a relationship with them that is available and approachable. And I'll add to that, because that's what Jesus has done for us. In our own lives, if we're only friends with people or have relationships with people that only follow the Lord, that's not the way that we were meant to be a disciple. We have to be willing to enter into relationships with people who do not follow Jesus. And that can be uncomfortable. That can be messy. That might mean going out on a limb. You might be trying to figure out, what I talk to someone about who doesn't follow the Lord? Because I've been in the church for 30, 40 years, and I don't know what it's like to even have a framework of what it means not to follow the Lord anymore. Well, ask for the Lord to help you in that. See, to be a disciple of Jesus means to love those lost, means to accept that love when we fail, and means for us to know that that love that we received is Jesus himself. So everything that we do and say must be anchored in love. Not just what we say, of course, not just what we do, but within our own hearts. So if you want to know how well you love whoever that other is, how you talk about them amongst someone that agrees with you. Is it in your own tone and speech? Is there more vitriol or is there more love? Do you see whoever that lost person is, or whoever that person is that really bugs you, or whatever that is? Maybe that person who is a believer who you don't get along with. Is the way that you talk about them anchored in love? Or is there more criticism, more walls being built up within your own heart and the other person listening to you? This is the call that we have as a disciple. And there's great joy in it. Because what we're able to do is when we position ourselves to love well, we are much happier people. We're not like the elder brother when we love well. We're able to feast at God's table each and every day, and we're excited when someone else comes in to feast with us. So that's what I encourage you today to think about, to understand that this benefit of following Jesus is love. Love for the lost, love for us when we fail, and that what God offers us, that love, is Jesus himself. He is the perfect demonstration of love that the world has received. Our call and purpose in life is to live into that love and allow others to experience that love too. Amen.